Right.
Okay, we should start by explaining why does this ballot seem more crowded than most years? It is. Not a lot, but a little. Used to be that all our local elections were nonpartisan offices, and there were a lot of them. We have like 19 school districts, and 11 city councils, and several dozen special districts. So that's nearly 100 bodies that hold elections every 2 years. And they just moved them from mostly November of odd-numbered years to even-numbered years. Because the law was passed a few years ago saying, well, if your voter turnout is so much lower in your local elections in odd-numbered years than it is in even-numbered years, you got to move to even-numbered years. And ours is really high on even-numbered years. In fact, we have the highest in the state in 2 out of the last 3 years for presidential races, a little less for governor's races, and a little less for local races. So we had to move all our elections over the course of the last few years. And this is the first big election it's really hitting. So city councils are on a slightly different schedule. There are only 2 up. Neither of them have a race, so that's a little unusual. But they'll join the crowd in 2 years, and we'll have the city council races. But we still got quite a lot. We have more city school boards than usual, like 9 contested races. That's nearly half of them. And there are fewer races usually in the special districts, the fire protection districts, sanitary districts, community service districts, a couple others, water districts. But there are several this time, a little more than usual. For example, there are 4 sanitary districts out of 5 have a challenger. And ironically, all 4 of those is one lone challenger running against 3 incumbents. Now that happens once in a while, but it's not all that common. This is all 4 of them. Same thing with one of the fire protection districts, same thing in a couple of the school board districts. So maybe that's why we have more contested races. We have more lone challengers running against all incumbents. The last thing I'll say, and I'm sure Dick has a few words, is that there's some theories as to why more people are running for more races and more of them are contested this year than usual, even considering the consolidation. Some say that with what's going on in Washington, D.C., it has inspired this furor, especially among Democrats, saying, run for something, anything. So there's a lot of people out there running for things that they might not have a few years ago. Others just think that more incumbents are stepping down than usual, at least among the school trustees. The special districts, they stay on for decades. They never turn over. They always run for re-election. In the school boards, about half of them half the time. And it seems more than that. 19 total are stepping down, I think 10 in contested races. The city council members tend to hang around for a while, on average. So, but they usually have contested races because there's usually people step up. But everyone, they get a pass once in a while. Dick?
Well, first of all, in statewide elections, there's a couple of things to understand. Fundamentally, is the California law now is the top 2 system. This applies to all partisan offices and all statewide constitutional offices, applies to the legislature, and it means that they operate basically on the same theory that the Board of Supervisors elections have been held in Marin County for 1 million years. The top 2 people in the June first round election, it's called the primary, but it's first round election, fight off in November. And that's just the deal. And it doesn't matter what party they come from. They can be a Democrat, Republican, vegetarian, or like myself, a meat eater. But I declined this question now. I have no party preference. I prefer to call myself an independent. I think even more people in California would be independents if we use that name. We just describe them as such. So top 2, understand when we go through the races for statewide office, it's top 2. Second thing to understand is that the biggest party in the state of California is the Democratic Party. They'll have a heavy emphasis on this stuff. The second biggest party, and I'm happy to say, as a just reference, I'm a member of that second biggest party. I'm an independent, and now the independents of the second biggest party in the state of California. They have been for a long time in Marin County, and now it's statewide. That's due to disenchantment with disenchantment. And hope springs eternal. It's disenchantment with the political system, and for a lot of friends of mine who are Republicans, they now are independents for the obvious reason. I had a close friend of mine spent his entire career as a Republican staffer. And he sent me an email one day saying, I just joined your party. Independent. Which is good. I want you to note that. It's a factor in the elections, and it's a factor, I don't make a prediction, but when I make my prediction calls, it's a big factor in predictions. Local elections, it's delighted to see people challenging special purpose districts. We have too many of them anyway. Nobody can follow them. You know who your special purpose district director is. When I talk to the grand jury, I usually pick on Nevada and ask them to tell me the name of their elected officials. And I'll start with county supervisor, for instance. And hopefully most grand jurors know the name of the supervisor. Then I say, I'm not doing trick questions. Just name one of your city council members. Usually we get most grand jurors to name one. How about fire protection district? Is the grand jury? I don't think so. School district? Probably not. Sanitary district? And who knows? I cover this stuff constantly. I don't know who some of these folks are. I know a few of the leaders, but you're not most of them. So if somebody's running to compete with these great folks, terrific. Just excellent. That's the people who've been there forever could use a term limit, by the way. Those people get a little challenge, marvelous. So where do we start?
Before we get on to our first candidate, I just want to say that as to the terminology of Democrats, Republicans, and independents, independents, like Dick calls himself, is what most people that were not Democrats or Republicans used to call themselves, and some still do, and that's fine, except that the official term became, some years ago, for many years, declined to stake, although that never really caught on. So now it's no party preference. In a way, he says his party is independence. That's not a party. It's a no party. Now, and you need the permission of the party to vote in the primary. So you're depriving yourself of voting in the primary if you choose not to be a member of the Democratic or Republican Party. Although Democrats allow independents, quote unquote, to vote in their primary, Republicans do not.
We are actually, hopefully, the start of the party. Actually, I invented the name of the California Party. For those of us who've been tired of voting for people we don't like too often. I had a dinner tonight with a friend of mine from Nevada, and he said, we have a better option in Nevada. None of the above. That's on every Nevada ballot.
Okay, first race is governor. Nobody cares about governor, so let's skip that one. What can I say? I first saw Gavin Newsom about 20 years ago at an event for the Democratic Central Committee of Marin. He was, I think, just appointed to the Board of Supervisors by Willie Brown after being on some commission. And we all said, that guy's going to go far. And sure enough, he is. I wouldn't be surprised to see him run for president. He's very charismatic. He's better than anybody I've ever seen other than Bill Clinton at ticking off his accomplishments. So it's usually gets sort of moderate, but he's pretty liberal. He has some baggage, but he seems not to have bothered him in his 2 runs for lieutenant governor. And so he's the overwhelming front runner against a guy who is a businessman, wealthy. I think the numbers, I forget the exact numbers, like 44 to 33 Democrat, Republican in the state. In Marin, it's 3 to 1, 3 times as many Democrats as Republicans. But John Cox, the Republican nominee, kind of came out of nowhere, unknown. San Diego businessman, was, I think, ran for several other things from his home state, Minnesota.
Illinois,
thank you.
and he ran for president of the United States in 19. He ran for president of the United States. 2008. That was missed by most folks.
I have to say, he looks like he's right out of central casting, and he sounds good. He's pretty right-wing, he's pretty pro-Trump. That probably won't go over too well in California. And so I predict a landslide for Gavin, as everybody else is.
And I do too. I think people will rue the day that January 1st rolls around, though, and they did do to Jerry Brown. He thinks of himself, and I know his friends tell me this, as the adult in the room in Sacramento. And I think you'll look back and say, he was the adult in the room in Sacramento. Gavin Newsom will win without doubt. The thought had been there's going to be a close Democratic primary. Antonio Villadrosa was the big challenger. He obviously didn't do as well as he thought. Cox, the real election, the basis of the 2 parties and the independents are voted in. And the real election in November is the opportunity for voters to vote up or down on Donald Trump. They'll vote, Cox is endorsed by Trump, and that means that the Republican base, or what's left of the Republican base, 23, 24, 25, 26% of the state of California, no matter what he does, will vote for John Cox. And no matter what Gavin Newsom does, the Democrats, the vast majority of the independents will be trying to get a message across to New York City or Washington or wherever, and they will vote for Newsom as a statement against Trump. That is open and shut. The question now is who's in Newsom's administration. People are vying right.
Lieutenant governor is interesting because it's a bunch of unknowns that nobody's ever heard of. 90% of the time, people run for statewide office after they've been turned out of the legislature. That's a typical profile of a candidate for statewide office. However, all the people lining up to run for lieutenant governor did not fit that profile, except for one. So it was a little interesting. There were two ambassadors, or former ambassadors, and one of them was a former president of State Bar, but he didn't make the top two. The two that did is the one who was a turned out state senator, Ed Hernandez. Most people haven't heard of him, don't know much about him. And Eleni Kounalakis, whose father you may have heard of if you're a political junkie, Angelo Sakopoulos, am I pronouncing that correctly? Came here as a penniless Greek immigrant, made millions in real estate, and now he's billions trying to buy his daughter a lieutenant governorship. She got money. But she campaigns very hard. She's indefatigable. She was the ambassador from the United States to Hungary. She has worked hard for the Democratic Party for many years. So even though she's not a turned out legislator, and in fact has never run for any public office before, and lieutenant governor is kind of an unusual place to start, she's not exactly an unknown quantity. And I like her a lot. I think she's very good. She's been here to Marin and speak a couple of times, and I've heard her, and I like her. And I don't know much about Ed Hernandez, and what I do, I don't.
Well, I always try to be nice to my daughter, and I want to thank Angela Sakopoulos for being nice because buying a seat for her. Ed Hernandez, on the other hand, he comes against one of my rules. I don't vote for people for statewide office who've been turned out and are trying to find some other job to go to. I do that across the board. This time I wouldn't vote for Hernandez because he's turned out and there's no one else to do. There's always the alternative for these turned out folks, and it scares the hell out of them, and that is the private sector. So we don't want that to happen. And I always say, I've devoted my life to public service, and I respond, well, I've kind of done that too. I'm in Rotary. And we do some visits and hall visits, and that's kind of public service. And so there's a whole life of public service out there where you don't get paid $175,000 a year. And so think about that when it comes to vote. Secretary of State Alex Padilla is the incumbent. Hasn't been a controversial figure in the slightest. And Walnut Creek attorney Mike Musser, I've tried to find out about Mike's background. All I know is he's doing a statewide bike tour. Tells me he's in good shape.
Really? Usually about half the statewide elected officials are running for re-election, and half are turned out, so there's a new person running. But in this case, there's only two incumbents running for re-election because there's been more shuffling than usual, people running for other offices. Secretary of State's one of them with incumbent Alex Padilla, and the other one is the next one. California Controller Betty Yee is running for her second term. Very strong, very well-liked, respected, slam dunk against, as in many or most of these cases, a Republican that nobody's ever heard of before, and they're going to raise a tenth as much money, and Konstantinos Roditis.
Well, I'm surprised you don't know of Konstantin Roditis. He owns the 24/7 taxi cab company in Anaheim. And so if you've gone to the Orange County Airport and you can get to Disneyland, you'd probably take Uber, so he's probably a very unhappy person.
Okay, thank you for your research on that. Okay, California Treasurer has also sort of an almost slam dunk incumbent, except he's not an incumbent. Fiona Ma, former San Francisco supervisor, currently a member of the State Board of Equalization, a common jumping off point from there to state controller. In fact, that's what Betty Yee did before. She is running, instead of a second term for Board of Equalization, understandably, for the vacant California Treasurer's seat made vacant when John Chung ran for governor. So she is a slam dunk winner as the overwhelming favorite and the Democratic candidate for California Treasurer against a Republican who I have heard of actually, Greg Conlon. He's been around run for some thing, former legislator or
State PUC president.
State PUC president. Okay.
I'll comment on State Board of Equalization when we get to that. But unfortunately for Fiona, she runs up against my rule of she's been turned out, so she's running for something else.
Actually, she's not. She can do another term on the State Board of Equalization. She passed it up to run for treasurer.
Well, you have to know that they decimated the State Board of Equalization. They got rid of 90% of their employees due to a giant scandal, but the state constitution left the office. And it's a really good deal if anybody in this room wants to run. Remember, well, it pays $151,260 benefits, car, all that stuff. But the biggest benefit of State Board of Equalization is no work. Nothing to do. They have 500 employees left, and that's it. They don't do anything what they used to do. To her credit, Fiona Ma has advocated, as many good government people in the state of California have done, abolishment of the State Board of Equalization. So that's Ma's credit. To Conlon's credit, the Republican, he's advocated that the state treasurer and controller be appointed by the governor's office rather than elected. Good idea. The most important purpose of a lot of these constitutional offices is to give termed out folks something to run for. In a properly operated system, in a properly operated state, these folks would not be out running for office. I mean, who knows what the controller does? Ask yourself this question. They would be headed by the, just like equalization now, by the governor. We know what the governor is and what he or she does. And so, kudos to Conlon for at least suggesting that those two offices be under the governor's.
Attorney General, we have a perfectly good Attorney General named Xavier Becerra, who won a resounding victory in the primary over a number of other people. And he too is running against a relatively unknown Republican who happens to be starting an ethics trial today, being accused of campaigning.
Look crazy. This happened in New York City. Becerra's going to win. Everybody knows the Republican Party. Becerra's going to win. And Stephen Bailey's a retired judge, runs for AG. I get that. You know, if you're retired, you think you can do something fine. But why, when you know you're not going to win, why would you start doing campaign ethics violations to build up your campaign? Go out and be a good guy. They had this in New York where a guy schemed and people went to jail so he could get the Republican nomination for mayor of the city of New York. Think about it. So what's the mayor's Republican nomination for mayor of New York worth if your name is not Michael Bloomberg?
But as an ultimate test of do people vote just for the D or the R after their names, I predict that despite this little scandal, that Stephen Bailey will still get 30% of the vote instead of 40%, because people are going to vote for the R in most cases. Some people might say, oh, I heard he was on a scandal or an ethics issue, I'll vote for the other guy. Insurance commissioner. The reason this one's interesting, it might be the only one the Democrat doesn't win. It's a trick question. We don't have a Republican running, but Ricardo Lara is the duly anointed Democratic nominee who was turned out legislator. State senator and author of the single-payer bill this year. But he's running against Steve Poizner, who used to be the insurance commissioner back 8 to 12 years ago when he was a Republican, and he actually got good marks for being a good, and in fact I know people in the Department of Insurance that say he was a very good insurance commissioner. Now, he decided to run for governor and lost to Meg Whitman in the primary 8 years ago, and in the process he took a hard right turn and took a lot of far right positions, which pissed a lot of people off, so you'd think he'd have a little more trouble. But no, people are saying, oh no, he's still a good guy, and he was a good insurance commissioner once, he will again. And so he came in about a tie with Ricardo Lara, didn't he? It was close.
Pretty close, yeah. I heard Laura speak at the Democratic Convention in San Diego, and I have to say Laura turned me off. His first remarks is, I'm proud to be here as a Latino. Getting Latino labor for everything's identity. And before he got into politics, he had to get into the identity. So that lost me with Laura. And anyway, he's turned, is Laura turned down? Laura's turned out, so he's off my list anyway. Poizner, well, you know, it's not much of a qualification, but he was a good insurance commissioner and insurance commissioner.
State Board of Equalization. Each district is 1/4 of the state. Who wants to run in a district like that? I sure don't. Do you? That's
Well,
totally unknown.
it's right. 151, 260.
Well, just like probably the superintendent of, I don't know, Shoreline School District, you know, that's, most superintendents make, that are well above that for the big districts. But the State Board of Equalization does set taxation levels for utilities. Beyond that, I don't know too much. Most people don't. It's a sort of obscure position, and like you say, they just gutted the power of it, but left the body in place.
I have in my list of things to do call Malia Cohen, who's a termed out San Francisco supervisor, and Mark Burns, who is hard to find much about him, but he is a Santa Clara County realtor. I know that. And I'm going to ask them both the same question. If elected, will you work to abolish the office? It's a real good, and the incumbent says yes. The person who's leaving says yes. Most good government folks in Sacramento say yes. The legislature apparently would have liked to have said yes, but it's in the state constitution. So the question is, if the member says abolish it, it might be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with your comments earlier about Fiona Ma deserving credit for supporting these reforms, so that's a good thing. However, I do want to clarify one thing. You said something about it not doing any work. I don't know whether it does or not. It probably does very little. But there's a common myth going around that there's a whole bunch of statewide boards and appointees that get paid these huge salaries of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they don't have to do any work. I can tell you that that's not true. I did a big research project on that about 20 years ago. And there are many, many dozens, if not hundreds of boards, all of which pay $100 a meeting. This is not big bucks. This is a stipend. There are a few, you can count them on the fingers of one, well, maybe two hands, boards which pay a full-time salary. And they do full-time work. And you have to apply. And theoretically, you should have some qualifications and do a good job because you get staff and a whole lot of things. too often they go to termed out legislators as a permanent or temporary holding place before they go on to some other office or feel like retiring.
One of them belongs to our luncheon club, and he's a close friend of Jerry's. And the other guys, the men and women who knew him well, said, I won't mention his name, oh, why did he do that? He had to go to Jerry for $100,000 a year, doesn't need the money. The English have had a better system for these people that fill these offices. They have the House of Lords. Canada has the Senate. These are bodies that do nothing, gives you a title, and there's no pay. We ought to have a House of Lords in California. We're not legislators, we need something to do, and we could have it. We had it one time in Fairfax, Lord Fairfax. Because that's where Fairfax comes from. And so if we did that in California, we'd be making some real reform.
I'll move a little quicker here. I think the last two statewide offices, or the last constitutional office, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, there's one other statewide office, U.S. Senator. But the State Superintendent of Public Instruction is being vacated by term-limited Tom Torlakson. And the anointed Democrat is Tony Thurmond, a young, ambitious Democratic assemblyman from Richmond, who is very good. I've heard him speak. He's quite impressive. The other candidate is Marshall Tuck, who you may recall ran 4 years ago against Tom Torlakson, who was running for his second and final term. Marshall Tuck is known primarily as being an advocate for and a successful operator of charter schools. Charter schools are becoming increasingly controversial. You know, charter schools do a lot of really good things, and if they're nonprofits, they're a lot more likely to be fine. But increasingly, more and more charter schools are for-profit chains who then begin to consider the profits of their shareholders and their large CEO salaries more than they consider the education of the youngsters they're trying to teach. So I have a little problem with the for-profits, and so they will remain a controversial issue, and it may be that Marshall Tuck is tainted with this taint about charter schools, fairly or not, because he is seen as a charter school guy.
I had an opportunity to introduce Dr. Lunch. We don't endorse books, we were just a guest last Friday. And a member stood up and says, I just want to read you a statement before Mr. Tuck speaks. It was from Congressman George Miller, perhaps one of the most progressive members of Congress of the East Bay. And Miller explained why he was endorsing Tuck. And that Tuck was one of his top advisors on education policy. And perhaps that's why Arne Duncan, who was Secretary of the Education under Barack Obama, endorsed Tuck. They're both Democrats. The issue is labor. Unions are strongly opposed to Tuck. They're strongly for Thurmond, who's an assembly member from Richmond, Contra Costa County. It's a real tough race. I would predict Tuck wins.
It's close. I think he did the part in June, didn't he?
It was very close.
Well, Tony Thurmond is not well known. He is not termed out. He's only in his second term in the assembly he did, so he hasn't been around the legislature that long to get well known. He had 12 years, he's nowhere near that. Anyway, he's been a leader in his first few years, but Marshall Tuck has run before. That's an advantage sometimes, and charter schools are very popular among a large segment of people. U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein. You'd think after 26 years in office, she'd be a slam dunk, but people are becoming more and more unhappy with her because they say she's too moderate. She's not opposing Trump's appointees as strongly as she could and should, although I think she's moved a little bit to the left to try to counter that argument. So, not surprisingly, she's challenged by, and ultimately in the final two runoff, with a pretty strong far-lefter, until recently, head of the state senate, Kevin De Leon. Didn't do very well in June. Don't think he's going to do very well in November against a 26-year incumbent with tons of money and name recognition, and frankly, respect from both parties. I like Kevin De Leon. I think he'd be much more progressive and better, but I recognize he doesn't have a chance.
Well, I have to say something nice about Kevin De Leon. He had a taco lunch at the Democratic convention, and it was terrific.
Let's not read the vote for him. I don't know what it is.
No, and he's turned out though, which is one reason. The speculation is that when we started this, this was an effort to become mayor of Los Angeles ultimately. Feinstein is going to win. The interesting thing was there was after the Democratic convention, De Leon, I guess she was not endorsed, and then they the executive committee endorsed De Leon. And certainly it's people who go to the Central Committee. These are the Democratic base, and they're for De Leon. It's kind of like the Republican base. The two bases, one part to the left, one part to the right. And then the voters spoke in June, and what was the tally?
16 to 44 or something. Now, it's shocking how low Diane was, but it was 3 times what De Leon got.
So that's what's going to play out in November. The ultimate race in this election in November is about Donald Trump. And even for the Democrats, they're only complaining against Feinstein since she's not fighting hard enough. You can determine that as well as I can or not, but that's the shot against.
I expected most or all of these statewide races would be 2 Democrats. There's only a few that are. Most of them are the more traditional Democrat versus Republican, because there are usually so many Democrats running that the second place Democrat didn't beat the top place Republican, so it's a Democrat versus Republican. So we should move on to Congress and the congressional outlook before the local legislative races and then the local nonpartisan races. These are going to be very brief because, big surprise, Jared Huffman's going to win re-election, Mike McGuire's going to win re-election, and Mark Levine's going to win re-election. Okay, we're done with that. They all have opponents, but they're very unknown, even though they've all run before. Well, one of them is new. And full disclosure, by the way, I am the treasurer for Mark Levine's opponent, Dan Monti. Nice guy, good guy, I've known him for many years, very progressive activist. And he is frustrated, as many progressives are, with Mark Levine not exactly being this fighting progressive that many of us would like, as we have had in the past, as we consider Mike McGuire to be more like. So some frustration with Mark Levine, but that didn't keep him from winning 80-20 in June, and he may win 80-20 again in November, as will Jared Huffman, maybe 70-30, because he has some Republican counties up north and Mike McGuire.
Well, but Jared Huffman's opponent is
Dale Mensing. He works at as a cashier at a supermarket, I think. But this is
multiple times in metropolitan Garberville. Which, when we think of Garberville, what do we think of? Agriculture. That's Dale Mensing.
Yeah.
Also, Mike McGuire is opposed by a former one-term Santa Rosa City Councilwoman by the name of
Veronica Jacoby,
who is rapidly, and who's a nice enough lady, but is rapidly becoming a perennial candidate.
She's run against Levine at least once. She ran for supervisor and lost.
Yeah, and that's right.
She is nice. She's very environmental, but she's not a terribly strong candidate. You know, to be a strong candidate, what do you need? You need to raise lots of money. You need to get lots of endorsements from people that know you and like you. It seems basic, but every election, for every office, just about, it seems like people come out of the woodwork running, thinking with this quaint, old-fashioned notion that, I don't know, the founding fathers said you could just stand for election. So I'll stand for election and assume that people will be a path to my door and elect me. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to work your butt off and campaign hard, and hopefully start with a base, because total unknowns don't usually do so well in the fundraising department or the endorsement department, and unless you put a whole lot of your own money into it, which some people do.
By the way, there's a typo on the slide. It's Mike McGuire.
Oh, yes, thank you. Mike McGuire. Thank you.
What's the next one?
So that's Mike McGuire and Mark Levine and Dan Monti. You have any comments on?
Well, the Monty's big issue is that McGuire, Levine is fighting hard enough for single-payer health care, Medicare for all. And Levine says, I support Medicare for all. And I'm actually for Medicare for all as well. I'm on Medicare right now. It's pretty good to me. But I'd sure like somebody, one of the two, to tell me how they're going to finance it. I'd really respect them if they did. Well, I haven't heard that.
As the former chair of the statewide Healthcare for All, which advocated 5 years ago, which advocated for single-payer healthcare statewide, it's always a myth when usually Republicans and some moderates and independents say, "Oh, we can't afford it; it costs too much." We're already paying twice as much as the average country per person on healthcare. We can cover everybody. We're covering a lot more under Obamacare than we used to, but we're still a lot of people under Obamacare. We cover everybody with better care for the same amount of money. This is not going to take something like just reshuffling the money that's already been spent.
Just tell us how they're going to do that. That would be great.
That's why it's called a single payer system. All the money that goes from all these different sources get funneled into one source. Is it government delivered health care? No, that would be socialism. We're not asking for socialism. It is government financed health care. So the health care would still be delivered in exactly the same way it is now. You like Kaiser? Stay with Kaiser. They just won't be an insurance company anymore. And insurance companies take too large a chunk of every healthcare dollar, like 30%. They pay their CEOs in the tens of millions of dollars, and they're beholden to their shareholders. This is not the way we do it. We're the only civilized country in the world that has an intermediary between people who need medical care and people who want to give medical care, and they do their best to keep them from getting it because that's how they make their profits.
I just need a little more details on how credibility. But I'm for the goal. In fact, I think the smart way to get the goal is to do what Howard Dean suggested. expand it to 62, I think you're a kid, to make it 60.
Might well be. There have been proposals at the federal level, but we've gotten a lot closer on the state level. We had two single-payer bills pass about 10 years ago. Both were vetoed by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who called them erroneously socialized medicine. But since then, we've had a harder time getting it even introduced as a bill, much less almost passed. It did pass the state Senate last year, but when it went to the Assembly, it was blocked by the Assembly Speaker, Anthony Brendan, who said, well, you haven't got the details yet on the financing. That was true, but it still could have been done. And it wasn't because he refused to refer it to the appropriate committee. But that's the long saga of the ongoing. We will get single payer someday, I just don't know when. All right, let's go on quickly to the local races. District Attorney is first for no particular reason, other than it's a runoff from the June race. I saw both of them here earlier today. I don't know if you're still Lori Bergoli and Anna Fletcher. Yeah, Lori's still here. Anna had to leave. These are of the three candidates, these are the two that were first and second and are now in a runoff. Lori got 48-something% and Anna got 29? 29. So they're in a runoff for district attorney, which is obviously one of the top, if not the top, interesting race, not just to attorneys, but I think everybody did.
Well, it is, I think it's the marquee race for Marin County because there's nothing else on the ballot. It's no supervisor race. What we really tend to care about is supervisor races. And they were resolved in the first round, it's June 1st round. So, you know, it's not a criticism of the race, it's simply what's the one that you pay most attention to and has the most countywide influence, it's district attorney. I tend to think that the most important purpose of the district attorney office is enforcing the law. Period. I don't have tremendous complaints about the enforcement of the law in this county. I can tell you that in Sonoma County, law enforcement is a big issue. It's a big issue because things haven't gone that well. They've had a lot of trouble in Sonoma County. So I am not a critic of Marin County's justice institutions, if you will. And I will say that as a 44-year practicing lawyer who's done a few jury trials in his life and other things like that, it helps to have some practical in-courtroom experience. Both of these people are qualified lawyers. Lawyer Bergoli is the only one that's done civil criminal work in the courts in any county. And God knows I went to criminal court once, and you know, if you're running for office, you always say, I remember when I was in criminal court. Were you ever in criminal court?
No, I don't do criminal court.
Well, I was 1 year out of law school, and the junior guy in the office. And they sent me to the courtroom because we got this guy.
I made a few appearances.
And so I could tell, if you're running for office, you tell stories about your famous criminal case. The truth of the matter is they have to plead. Waive time. I'm going to do two things. If you're a criminal lawyer, this you've got to know. Defense lawyer. Plead not guilty. Write that down. And then waive time. Everybody's entitled to a speedy trial. But no defendant wants a speedy trial. You waive time. That's because witnesses disappear. People forget things. Things get lost. Time is the defendant's friend. And that's all I learned. That's all I know about criminal law. All I know is I don't know enough to go into court today and do anything except know that if this lady here is arrested, not guilty, waive time.
Okay, moving on to the next couple of races, well, not necessarily in that order, is the district attorney is on every 4 years, like all the other countywide department heads, which there's only 4 left, and several were up this June. And the district attorney will be decided in fall, as you know. One of another two, which are usually on even number of years, is the Marin Healthcare District. You all remember that there have been huge battles a decade ago and 2 decades ago over Marin Healthcare. There are 2 sides, pitched battles over the control of Sutter and all these things. Well, they've been getting along recently. In recent years, they've been no challenge. And the people who used to be on the opposite sides of these big battles are now on the same side. They've all come together. They say they've matured, and they all support each other. And why wouldn't anybody challenge that? I don't know. One of the incumbents who won surprisingly 4 years ago is stepping down after only 1 term. There's a vacancy. 2 of the incumbents stepping for, both longtime incumbents running for re-election, Larry Bedard and Jennifer Ranks. They're not 1 but 2 surgeon. It's not unusual for a doctor to step forward to replace somebody stepping down. In this case, there are 2. And I don't know much about either one, except Brian Sue, who first filed, didn't have a ballot statement. That was really dumb. Any serious candidate for any serious race, and any candidate, campaign consultant will tell you the most valuable use of any money you can have, and it's cheap for a little tiny race. It's a lot for like college board countywide, it's like $1,300 or something. But it's worth it. and he doesn't have a ballot statement. So forget him. He's not serious. Try and sue. He will lose. Almost certain. The other doctor is Edward Alfrey. So I said, okay, maybe he's the chosen guy now because he came in and did a ballot statement. He's another surgeon as well. Then the wild card, Lisa Bradley, who many of you may know, or at least know of, as Bradley Real Estate. She's become somewhat controversial from a comment she made at Susan Adams Town Hall 4 years ago. I and others did not know how serious a candidate she would be for Marin Healthcare. Melissa walked away. And I've had a couple talks with her since, and I was talking with her on the phone last night, and she has thought a lot about this race, she says. She has studied it and researched it, and she has done an admirable amount of research. She does not have any kind of medical background, and she thinks that it would be appropriate for people other than doctors and nurses and PhD medical researchers to be on the board. In fact, that's pretty much all there's been for decades now is doctors and nurses and PhD legal and medical researchers. So she thinks there ought to be a little more diversity and have just a person who has lots of good business experience, I'm sure. But so I think her campaign will rise or fall with that claim that there should be some diversity amongst the board members.
All I know is that this used to be one of the hottest issues in the county we're in, and now this is a terrific. This is what we call progress. We've eliminated the contentious, divisive issue, and now we simply run a hospital. I had heart surgery there; it was quite successful. I don't have any complaints. That's wonderful. Sometimes problems do get resolved, and these were you went to some of those meetings. Those were I wrote a piece one time. It was just simply describing it was the definition of dysfunctional. The people screaming at us and this, and it was just crazy. And now seems like probably 5 qualified people. Good luck to them all. Bradley has a hell of a sign operation now. But they seem to say something else on the sign except hospital board. The word's for sale.
She said she's going to finance her own campaign. She will probably not lack for money. But she's shared with a number of people, so I'm not saying anything she would not want me to share. She said this quite publicly, is that she's going through divorce, she's a victim of domestic violence, she's going through changes in her life, she wants to help people for the rest of her life, and she wants to start with the Marin Healthcare District.
There you go. Next one.
All right, the next one is College of Marin. They too have had some quiet years recently. Suddenly, they got a bunch of people running, and why? Well, there's a vacant seat. 2 of the incumbents are running for re-election. The third one resigned a few months ago. And rather than fill it, which they usually do, Brady Beavis resigned, and they said, no, we'll keep it open because there's an election coming up. Well, of course, if there's an open seat, it's more likely to draw in new candidates, and there are a bunch of new candidates. One of whom doesn't have a ballot statement, so forget him, he's not serious, Cullen. Then there's, let's see, we're on the wrong page here. There's another guy, Ovitz, who didn't have a ballot statement, but then he appealed and got one. Ovitz, I think he ran for the Lagunitas School Board a few years ago. Another one, a Republican, George Rothbard. Don't know much else about him. I saw the thing and heard him speak. So, I don't know. I think the only really strong challenger out of the 4 new candidates is Suzanne Brown Crow, who ran for, I think, Novato Sanitary District. And she's very tied in with the Democratic Party and very tied in with a whole lot of other things, and she's very strong and smart and will be a strong candidate and will raise the money and get the endorsements and win. I'm not sure I can say that about any of the others.
Well, compliments to the College Board. Not appointing an incumbent means that they didn't try to pick the successor. Leaving it open to the public to decide is a honorable example of trusting your constituents. And I don't know any of these folks, but I do know the College Board members, and I do think I'm really delighted to see that action. Kudos to the College Board. Ask yourself, now this is kind of fun, ask yourself, when you don't know anybody who's running for office, you have a couple of options. One, which is probably the right option, don't vote for that people if you don't know who they are. Otherwise, people go in and they base it on ballot designations. As life goes on, it's become more imaginative to be a ballot designation. And there was an issue before the court last week about 2 Republicans running for Congress who wanted to call themselves farmer or ranchers. Neither had been in the farming or ranching business for some time. I have no ambition to run for office again, but I do know that I have lemons, an herb garden, and in a good year, tomatoes. I consider myself a farmer. And Melissa Bradley is running also as a realtor and as a mother. I am, and I'm not sure which one is better now, you have to poll this, a father, and a grandfather. Now, which is the better for the vote count? It's up to you. I mean, that's kind of simple. So I could be farmer, grandfather, another good one.
There are actually strict rules.
Environmentalist.
There you go. It's a good one.
Environmentalist.
There are strict rules on ballot designation. In fact,
Farmer.
yeah, okay.
All right. Grandfather.
Yeah. Ask your grandkids. They'll tell you that's the best.
And I was on the Plain Conservation League before.
There you go. There you go. When you run for office, the registrar of voters office will hand you a little book with 20, 30 pages. 3/4 of it is on ballot designation. There are all kinds of rules. You can't give anything that sounds like a qualifying, because you're too positive a qualification. So there's all kinds of, and you can't use former designations. It's complicated.
Well, that's where DeRosa had a big problem. Actually, DeRosa ran for governor, and most of us know him. And actually, an excellent candidate, I would say. Was a very good mayor of Los Angeles. But because of those rules, he could not describe himself as former mayor of Los Angeles. And he used some term that was just was vague, bland, real good kind of stuff. And I truly believe that if his ballot designation properly was not granted to him, but had been former mayor of Los Angeles, he would have done much better. And that's knowing that law is an arcane specialty some attorneys have adopted. I should have done that years ago.
We're running low on time. We've got a few more races, and state ballot measures. But the couple of school districts, Sausalito Marin City School District often has the most or almost the most candidates. There are 3 seats. 2 incumbents are up for re-election. I think Josh Barrow and Ida Green. 4 or 5 people I mostly don't know, except for Peter Romanowski, perennial candidate. Doesn't have a ballot statement, so forget him. And so neither does somebody else. But there are some sharp ones on there, like Bonnie Rose Huff, I think 20, 30 years ago. Very sharp. Anything about Sausalito Marin City?
I'm not going to comment on any of the school board races or the special district races because I don't live in the districts. Yeah. I just don't follow them if I don't live in the district.
San Rafael has 2 incumbents, 1-term Rachel Kurtz and multiple-term Natu Tuatigaloa, I'm pronouncing that correctly, running for re-election, and a challenger to both of them, John Marker, who I know nothing about. You? No. Novato School District has 2 incumbents running for re-election, Maria Aguila and Derek Allen. Maria's a regular at this group. And oh, there she is, right in front of me. Sorry, I didn't see Maria. Of course, we should have reintroduced her. Sorry. Anyway. The third one, Shelley Scott, is not running for re-election because she just got elected in June as county assessor recorder. So if you're losing one of your colleagues, then who will become the county assessor recorder. And there are Diane Gassa, Azadeh Hunter, and Jim Schroyer. Now, why does that name ring a bell? That is Tony's husband, running for school board in Nevada. Other than that, I don't know anything about any of these people, and it'd be interesting to see who wins. And I'm sure Maria here is looking forward to seeing who her new colleague will be. Tamalpais High School District. What I find interesting about this is none of the incumbents are running for re-election. Sometimes 1 steps down. On very rare occasions, 2 steps down, but all 3. And they just put a tax measure on the ballot. That seems kind of odd to put a tax measure on the ballot, but we're not running for re-election, just stand by it. It seems odd to me. So we have 4 people running for 3 seats, none of whom are incumbents.
All I'll say is I live in the Tamalpais Senior High School District, and this goes back to the classic example. When I go to the ballot box and things, I read these names. I can't find them right now. Do you have them there?
Yeah. District's also on.
Where you got it?
Right.
All right, I'm going to read them to you. Barbara McVeigh, Dan Oppenheimer, Cynthia Rorschach, and Kevin Sandoval. Probably all fine people. You're supposed to pick 3 of those 4. The right thing to say, in my opinion, is it's me, who's never heard of these people before. It's not to cast a ballot and say, you know, Oppenheim fun. That's not the right way to pick a candidate for office. So if you don't know the candidate, I would urge you not to try to say, did I go to high school with a McVeigh?
We gotta go. I probably know as many of these as anybody, and every election, 3/4 of people that don't ever heard of these people. People come out of nowhere, and sometimes they win, sometimes they're good. Sometimes they don't win, sometimes they're not so good. Last one, let's see. Kentfield School District, 5 candidates for 3 seats. I think 1 or 2 incumbents. Marin, I don't have them on this list. Water District, big deal, every even-numbered year. They have individual races for individual seats, not at large like most of the rest of these. 2 of the 3 divisions have contested races. Longtime incumbents both. Jack Gibson 20-some-odd-year incumbent is being challenged by Greg Nell, who's a 16-year incumbent of the Santa Fe School Board. In another seat, longtime incumbent, 16 years I think, Cynthia Kohler is being challenged by a Joby Tapia, who I didn't know who they were, but the IJ had indicated it was a secretary of the Marin Income Property Owners Association or something.
Not me.
Anybody know?
Yes.
I live in the district too.
Okay. All right, that's.
Well, the first race is a real race. The Greg Nell race
Yes.
and Jack Gibson race is a real race because they're both been around for a long time, both respected people, both very good people. And there'll be real issues. I mean, one of the big issues is, to what extent is the district prepared for wildland fires. Greg Nell is raising that issue. So that's number two. Cynthia Kohler's going to win a landslide. But of the other race, I think there's a real race. So I think it's something to follow.
Speaking of water district races, there's also a race in the North Marin Water District, which rarely gets a race. The two incumbents, Rick Freitas, longtime, and Jim Grossi, I think recently appointed, longtime Marin family, are being challenged by Tina McMillan. Now that name rings a bell. I know I've seen it and heard it before, maybe letters to the editor in the IJ or something. But so there is, again, a challenger running against both incumbents. Dixie School District has 4 people running for 3 seats, one incumbent, Brad Hansberger. Don't know much about Dixie, and that, I'm sorry?
Brad.
Yeah, Brad, yeah. So that leaves the state ballot propositions. Unlike June, where there are 4 or 5 boring ones which nobody cared about, there are 11 of them. They run from 1 to 12, but the most interesting one, perhaps, arguably, was struck by the courts a few weeks ago to split California up into 3 states. Now, it wouldn't have made it, because people would have voted for it, the legislature never would have gone for it, and Congress would have gone for it. So there was no chance, but it's interesting. So that's off the ballot. But the others, the first 5 are all bond measures, and usually bond measures, okay, fine, bond measures, that's good. And 1 and 2 are kind of no-brainers. 3 has some controversy. All we have so far, we're early in the process. You're going to start hearing more about this for the next few weeks. Right now, very little has come out in the newspapers and the ads and the mailers, because we haven't got our ballots yet. But the Democratic Party has endorsed in some of these ballot measures, and Legal and Voters has as well. I'm very active with both of those. What else we got? You want to talk about some of these propositions?
Well, we got 3. Prop 5. I bring up Prop 5 because, first of all, is there anybody in this room that's either 55 years or older? Or disabled? This is an interesting situation, and it applies really to you folks because I know somebody in this Santa Fe resident in this situation. They're retiring, and they're thinking of moving fast to Sonoma. And the question is, can they move their property tax? What do you pay now? The basis, the fair rate I pay. Let's put it that way. The fair rate I pay. I bought my house in 76, so it's a fair rate.
You probably pay a quarter of what your neighbors paid who recently purchased it.
I pay a quarter of what I pay on my property owned in San Francisco. It's an apartment. The answer is, it's only fair. To me, it seems to me that people are making decisions on lifestyle, on what county they live based on how they rent and move their property tax. The Democratic Party is supposed to, I'm not sure very many people know that, but I've never really seen the Democratic Party take a position, the state party take a position that anywhere did not raise a tax. And so in this case,
This is cutting a tax.
well, it's not cutting it. Well,
If they take their base, there'll be less local money.
I've never seen a situation where the money went to the constituent rather than some special interest group. So I obviously criticizing the Democratic Party, but it's no use. That's why I do this as an independent. I get to do that.
I don't know why people are opposed to this. I don't have a good reason. The only one I can think of is that for years, some of us have said that Prop 13 was a bad idea to begin with. It's gotten worse and worse every decade. And they keep coming up with ways to prop it up and fix it and make it a little more palatable. And this is one of those. At some point, we have to stop propping it up and repeal it. Or at least have a split roll, which almost made the ballot this fall, but it will in 2 years from now, to regularly reassess commercial property, which would bring a whole new influx of money in there, just to treat it fairly, so we treat commercial property like we do residential property, which does turn over more regularly.
All I can suggest is don't touch residential.
No, I don't.
In fact, I dare any Democratic candidate for office to touch residential. Proposition 6 is repeal the state gasoline tax. The present initiative, the way this initiative is written, has problems, in my opinion. But the opponents are using it have 2 problems. One, they're really putting it on the ballot because they think it's going to bring out a Republican vote. It's going to help Republican candidates in November. That's not going to be. America is so divided right now. If you're a Democrat, you're voting for the Democrat. If you're a Republican, you're going to vote for the Republican. And in this state, if you're an independent, you're going to vote for the Democrat. The other problem I have with the no on this is, and there are problems with it. I mean, you could go through this, I'm going to do a piece on this. The other problem is the concept of a gas tax is not the problem. We need a gas tax. And I would feel a lot better about the no folks if they tell me their alternative. They'll save money somewhere. Well, I need an alternative, a funding alternative. And in my opinion, you ought to go for roads. You ought to go for what they say it's going to go for. My big problem with this is it goes through a mishmash of things the legislature thinks is in this year. And I would, if I was right with our thing, I'd put the same tax on them, but I'd put it just for roads. That's where I would be coming from on sense.
Yeah.
I think it's going to lose. I think the tax is going to be repealed. I think it's very easy to vote against any tax.
17 cents a gallon, and it's what, we haven't had a gas tax increase in 10 years?
I'm talking politics.
27 years, thank
It's
you.
very difficult. Most political, in my experience, Democrat, Republican, Independents want the same thing. Less taxes, more services.
There's no contradiction there.
Well, that's human nature.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right, exactly.
And so that's why I think the tax is repealed. Unfortunately, I haven't heard an alternative. And that's what really bothers me on this. The lack of an alternative, I think, is intellectually dishonest.
Final comments on, there are about a dozen local ballot measures, mostly so small, mostly in small areas that none of you live in, and most of them are paramedic taxes, which are pretty routine increases. There are a few exceptions, a little larger, there's a school parcel tax or bond measure here and there. The biggest one is the statewide extension of the transportation sales tax, which was just passed 6, 8, 10 years ago. It's supposed to last 15 years. Measure A.
Countywide.
Countywide. Yeah, what I said.
Statewide.
Sorry, countywide. I'm going down the countywide one. But they decided to renew it early because, I don't know, they get a more favorable rate, they could accelerate the payments, they could bond against it, they could start doing projects sooner rather than later, and who knows what later will look like. Let's do it now while it polls well. So that's why that's on there. We forgot to give our predictions on Congress.
I'm going to make a statement on that. My problem is, I've been guilty of this in my past. This is called Christmas treating.
Yes.
You put everything, go to every little group and say, what do you want here, what do you want here, what do you want here? And one of the reasons, they're hurting themselves. One of the reasons this doesn't work is that since we don't do big projects for something you can see, the folks have the impression they're not getting anything for their money. Nobody sees a little bit here, bike lane there, stop sign there. You don't see that. I mean, you go through the list, crossing guard, and I'm also crossing guard. But you needed a heart, soul, something that the public could say, I want that. That's going to improve the quality of my life. And I know that debate took place in the inner sanctum of the Transportation Authority in Marin, but the Christmas tree wins out because you know just how politics works.
A lot of legislation, a lot of ballot initiatives, and a lot of local measures do exactly that. They just, well, we put an ornament there for that group, they'll vote for it, and another ornament there for that group, and they'll vote for it. Another, pretty soon you have so many ornaments and so many groups voting for it. You say, yes, it'll win now, but that's a pretty damn expensive Christmas tree you've just loaded up.
I've done it myself. I've participated in that myself. I've participated in that as an elected official because it's just there's a natural temptation for it. I come to think to myself, it hurts public confidence. We want to see something tangible that's going to improve the quality of our lives. This money could do that.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say about a state ballot measure is 10. It might be the biggest one. It's rent control is a tremendously divisive topic and has been for decades. Several decades ago, about a dozen cities in the state, usually big old cities in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland, passed rent control measures. They're all slightly different, but they also have some basic concepts. A few years later, they passed a measure to restrict rent control called Costa-Hawkins, limited to only properties built before, I think, 95, and it also prevented vacancy decontrol, so that as soon as a tenant moved out, no matter how long they've been there, you could bring it up to market rate. Well, Prop 10 will make it easier for cities to do rent control and allow vacancy decontrol for the first time, and take away that limitation about buildings before 95, so this is tremendously controversial. A lot of tenants out there, they're saying, yes, we're getting gouged by incredibly rapidly rising rents, and landlords are making an unfair profit, and landlords are saying, wait a minute, I'm a mom-and-pop landlord, that is my life savings here, and you're restricting what kind of rent raises I can put on it. They both have good arguments. I wish there was a way to prevent gouging and unfair profits on the part of landlords and protect tenants from being evicted and homelessness just because they can't afford the rent. But I also don't want to take away that right of landlords, especially if they're a mom and pop landlord that invest their life savings in this, they're working hard for this, and they're not doing unreasonable rent increases. It's hard.
There's not a word you said I could disagree with.
Anyway, Congress, we forgot to give our predictions for Congress.
Oh, the big one.
Yes, I just read this morning that somebody predicts, my favorite daily blog, electoral-vote.com, every day, and good articles, and they started their culmination of all the polls in all the states, and they think the Democrats will take the Senate 51-49. Now, there are only 6 close states, and 4 of them lean Democratic right now, and 2 of them lean Republican right now. So there's a play in those 6. You know, it could be up 2 or 3 for the Democrats, 2 or 3 for the Republicans. I've considered it a long haul because just the numbers look bad. You know, there are like 33 seats up, 23 of them belong to Democrats, so there's not much room. And worse, of the 10 Republican seats, 9 of them are in deep red states. So we don't have much chance of picking up, the Democrats don't have much chance of picking up Republican seats, except maybe Nevada, which is the only state that Hillary Clinton won that has a Republican incumbent, and Democrats may well take Nevada and pick up 1 seat. But worse is the Democratic incumbents. There are 10 Democratic U.S. senators in states that Trump won. Those are going to be hard. In 4 or 5, those are so personally popular that they'll probably win. But in 4 or 5, they're currently trailing in the polls. Now, a lot could happen between now and then. So we could lose 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 incumbent Democratic senators, and our 50-49, I guess it's 51-49 back to now with Arizona's announcement, it could get worse. But if everything falls right, and there's a big blue wave, and all the Democratic incumbents retain their seats, and we were able to pick off Nevada, which would create a tie, there are 2 or 3 possible upsets where you would never guess the Democrats would win a seat, but currently we have a good shot. Arizona, Tennessee, Texas is within a few points. So there are several surprises there which you wouldn't think the Democrats could take. It would have to fall just right. So it all comes down to the size of the big blue wave, and we don't know yet. I think there will be a wave. All indicate, you know, the generic Democrat versus Republican polls, the special elections leading up this far, and of course polls are becoming less and less accurate, and you only have to look at November 2016. But all signs point to a blue wave, but we don't know how big it'll be. Despite all expectations by so many of us, Trump has remained surprisingly popular among his base, and his base keeps increasing. He's taken up the entire Republican Party. I wouldn't have guessed he could do that a year or 2 ago. And you know, that's like 40%. We never thought he'd get up that high. It's still low for President of the United States, and I heard the other day he back down in the 30s instead of the 40s. A president whose popularity and approval ratings is in the 30s rather than the 40s is going to lose 20 or 30 or 40 House seats. That's a different kind of race than the Senate seats, which are state by state. So chances are very good that we will take back the House. I don't know if it'll be by 10 seats or 20 seats or 30 seats or 40 seat Democratic margin if we get a really big blue wave. But it has to appear just at the right time, and it has to hold up and watch across all those 5 or 10% undecided voters. Like you say, most Democrats are going to vote for the Democrat, most Republicans are going to vote for the Republican. But there's a few undecideds out there. And if they get disgusted enough with Trump, you're right, it's all about Trump. Nationwide, especially in California.
I wouldn't be overconfident on the House. It's still a real race. I would think the Democrats take the House, but I just drove the road from 2 days ago. What's today? Wednesday? Monday, I left Chicago and I arrived at Albuquerque. It's a long way by train. 24 hours later, that's a lot of territory between Clark County and Albuquerque, which is a Democratic place. And I'm not sure I went through, except for Kansas City, I went through any place in that area. Now, admittedly, nobody lives out there. But we have arranged a system in America where that's irrelevant.
They get 2 senators. Your Wyoming has 600,000 people total.
A city council member district in New York has more people than you got in the state of North Dakota. So that's not to be forgotten. And there was a comment, and I forget his name now, in San Francisco, who's a Democrat, but he wrote a piece called 25 Ways that Democrats Can Blow. And they have the possibility of doing that. They always have the possibility of doing that. I hope they don't, but they do. I do think that the Democrats can take the House, and the margin is going to tell you what happens in the Senate. If there's a big blue wave, which I'm not predicting, there's different sizes and waves. I would think the Republicans retain control of the Senate. If they don't, holy moly.
Even with just the House, you will see dozens of investigations, because suddenly the committee chairs are all Democrats. You will see articles of impeachment drawn and filed. you will probably see an impeachment that most of the Democrats are convinced by Mueller's report, which I think will come out next spring, and say, yes, he's committed all these crimes. Are some of them high crimes and misdemeanors? Are some of them worthy? The Democrats have to be very careful. They don't want to do what the Republicans did with Clinton 20 years ago, which is overreach and impeach, and the voters said, what are you doing? That is not an impeachable crime. You guys are crazy. And Bill Clinton actually picked up seats in Congress for the Democrats in that midterm election of 1998.
If I was Trump, I would not be worried about Mueller. It's a shocked look in your face. I'd be worried about Vladimir Putin. Because if he turns, he's got the tax record. He's got the dossier. Put that out. Holy moly. So, but I think Democrats win the House and lose the Senate. I'm going to predict they lose the Senate. And I don't think there's going to be any impeachment because somebody's going to put a resolution in, but it's not going to go anywhere without the Senate. If they have the Senate, Brockbank's right.
Does that do it? Wow. What a wrap up. Well, they covered it so well, I'm sure there are no questions. Thank you for coming. All right, one or two.
Good try.
One very quick one. By the way, this is really entertaining, but if you don't believe in voting for any termed out folks, does that mean that you don't believe in term limits? That's question number one for Dick. And Greg, you never actually said anything on the district attorney's race. You set it up and said it's the most important local one, and then you never said anything on it. I'd like to hear what you each have to say.
I heard all the Democrats turned out. The only one that had another defect in my mind when I heard them, and I sat there in San Diego. You were there.
Yes.
Convention. The overwhelming feeling I had when I listened to the turned out Democrats running for this office was mediocrity. I will say that the people running, including De Leon, who's term limit, but including De Leon for governor and for senator, were not mediocre. It made me listen. De Leon, and I can say nice things about Feinstein, but De Leon is no fool, and he would probably be a decent mayor of the city of Los Angeles. So when I hear that, and I hear good speakers and somebody with substance other than this usual orgy of identity politics, which we're taking there, but it was mediocrity. And so, yeah, a lot of these guys are just plain mediocre. They're not bad people. And so I have no interest in that. I have no interest in a person climbing the greasy ladder of the Democratic and Republican Party for the rest of their life to keep themselves in public service when there's public service available, as you've just found out on the Corridor Madera City Council. Down.
Yeah, I realized I hadn't said anything about the DA's race, and all three of the candidates that were on the ballot in June are all very good people, very well qualified. They all campaigned very hard. I had opportunities to talk to them at least a dozen times each at various events, for a few minutes here and there. So I feel like I got to know them, and I like them all. And I tried to remain neutral for a long time because I'm on the endorsement committee of both the Democratic Party and the Marin Women's Political Action Committee. Ultimately, I came down and endorsed Anna Pletcher, and I'll tell you why. I did nothing wrong with Lori Fergoli or A.J. Brady. In fact, Dick, I think, said it right. If you think that the DA's office is running so well that it requires no change, and you want an insider to continue, then you probably want Lori Fergoli, because she is that insider. Whether or not Anna Pletcher can convince enough people that there are problems with the DA's office that need an outsider to come in for the first time in 8 years is a harder road to hoe, not to mention the fact that she came in 20 points behind her in June. So clearly, Lori is in the front-runner seat, and Anna is not. Anna is tremendously, I think, charismatic and progressive about certain issues. Now, I'm not a criminal law attorney, so I'm not really expert in these, but I am an attorney, so I'm very interested. And things like rape kits and bail reform and all these other hot-button issues in criminal justice reform, I think we want our DA to be a spokesperson and a leader for criminal justice reform statewide. I admit that's rare. In San Francisco, they do it. Maybe Anna could be that person. I don't know. Lori is the ultimate insider. If that's what you want, you're going to vote for Lori. If you want somebody that's maybe an outsider, come in, shake things up a little bit, and I think be inspiring and be a progressive leader in criminal justice issues, maybe Anna's for you.
You guys have been great. I'd like to hear your thoughts specifically about some of the Central Valley congressional races.
I feel bad that I don't know them all by name. They've been in the spotlight intensely for many months now. There's a group called Flip the 14. I want to run fundraisers. That's a little ambitious. Mostly the Democratic Party and others have focused on 7 of the 14 Republican congressmen in California. and say, there's a really good chance that we could take a number of Republican seats right here in the state because Trump did so poorly and Hillary did so well, and I think 7 that they're targeting, Hillary won all those districts, and we have an incumbent Republican in 7. So they're all being targeted. 2 of them have resigned and stepping down, so it's an open seat. And there's a lot of work going on in all those districts. I don't know whether we'll take 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, but we will take some. And there's a lot of people going to those counties and knocking on doors, a lot of people calling those counties. So there are massive campaigns, including at 4th and D is the Democratic Party headquarters for like the 3rd time in the last 3 cycles. Drop by any time or come by and do some phoning. And we actually in Marin outpunch our weight substantially, as you've heard Paul Cohen here say. We make hundreds of thousands of calls every election. We raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so Marin is a big player along the lines of the big cities.
You should have my wife here. I know nothing about those districts. She's volunteering in one of those districts. And so she could give you the names of who's running. I just haven't followed it. So I think one has an R. Devin Nunes, that's the Fresno district.
He's a pretty safe district. I don't think there's too much chance of flipping him, even though he's pretty controversial as the chair of the Intelligence Committee, at least until next year maybe.
Registration is crucial in these districts. I mean, that's going to determine. This guy in Southern California apparently was taking the money for the campaign to pay for the babysitter and blamed it on his wife, and he's going to win. Because it's a heavily Republican district. And frankly, if you had a Democrat who's going to do something as stupid as that in a highly Democratic district, they would say, what they're saying about the guy in Orange County, is Orange County or San Diego County? Or both? San Diego. They're saying is, you can re-elect him, he's going to quit, go to jail, but then we'll have a chance for a special. I mean, he's going to hell on a basket. This is the way we analyze and determine who's going to represent us in the United States House of Representatives.
All right, we have a quick comment over here from someone you might recognize.
Hi everyone, I'm Lori Fragoli. Just quickly, I think it's really important to do your homework in the district attorney's race. I think it boils down to experience. Do your homework. We have many restorative justice and progressive programs in this county that my office and other county partners are participating in. So I think that's a really important thing you need to look at. Thank you.
Is she related to Gary Fragoli?
Yes.
Thank you. I think we saw some hands over here. No? Oh, here we go.
I just want to make one comment. I'm a retired public defender from a different county, but for me, for the district attorney's office, it would be important if the district attorney had criminal trial experience. And I think that my understanding is that Ms. Fragoli does have that. And 28 years. 28 years, and I'm not sure about the,
She's a little younger. She has led a team of prosecutors at the federal level.
Right.
Not the same as a local county district attorney, but some experience leading teams of attorneys.
I just think that that's really important. As a public defender dealing with judges and district attorneys, the best ones were ones that had experience in that community, actually trying cases, picking juries, having to argue in front of judges, and having to deal with what issues could come up in appeal. That would be my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
I can tell you, I practiced law for 44 years. The last 25 of those principally plaintiff's personal injury work. And when we arbitrated the case, or mediated the case, we didn't care if the arbitrator or mediator was a defense attorney or a plaintiff's attorney. We wanted somebody that knew this business and knew the facts and knew the deals in the local courts. And so that experience, I'm just speaking as a lawyer, that experience of actually being there yourself is incredibly important. And that doesn't matter when you're hiring a lawyer. The woman or man should have the practical experience to go in and represent you. If they don't, then you need to keep looking.
Question over here.
I'll add a comment to that. The person who's going to be the DA is probably not going to spend so much time making the decisions that you're talking about, but managing the $18 million budget, and I don't know how many lawyers there are. And so in a sense, the DA needs to be somebody who knows how to run a big department and a big budget, and has experience doing that. And had training by the Department of Justice in exactly doing that. So
That's a really good point. I just want to extend it a little bit. We've got a lot of state constitutional officers who are managing huge departments for both parties, huge departments, giant budgets, and they're turned out legislators. What's their experience in running a bureaucracy?
but Anna's not that.
So I'm extending to
Yes. No, I.
former assemblyman versus assemblyman, state senator, so-and-so.
Yes.
All right, let's move over to the side of the room.
Sorry. Hi, my name is, I am Maria Aguilar father. That's when I didn't know me. And I just want to talk about her. She wants to be elected because she wants to repay what the Novato the schools did for her. We came here legally 40 years ago, living always in Novato. I ask you, for all of you, you know, and my reason that I want that she wins is because the high salary. Thank you very much for
Other questions? Other questions?
My name is Cindy Winter, I live in Larkspur. There's been one question that has been lacking in this entire discussion. That is the future. We are facing the so-called autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars. In the next 30 years, which is the term of Measure A, there are going to be massive changes in Marin County. And that's why TAM selected the 30 years, because that's what most knowledgeable experts expect this transition to take. And I'm also concerned about sea level rise. And I think the environmentalists and TAM need to get together and think about how we are going to cope with that on the major roadways. Highway 37 is also a problem. And we have 101 and other roadways that I'm sure I'm omitting at the moment. So we have these pressing problems now, but let's think a little bit more about the future. Thank you.
Anything about the future?
Would I interrupt?
Okay, let's go to the past. No, just kidding.
Hi, I'm Ms. Brown of the fame associated with the golf course in San Geronimo. If any of you would like to sign a petition, I have one here. The origins of this was a backroom deal in March and April of 2017. The public didn't know anything about it until October, when the Board of Supervisors voted on it as an accomplished fact. We've decided to file a lawsuit in order to make sure that they do a CEQA, and we are circulating an initiative petition so that the community plan that says it's to be a golf course and it can't be changed without a vote of the people. So this initiative is democracy in action. It's let's put it on the ballot, let's decide what we're gonna do with 157 acres of land out there. It's a wonderful fire break. It costs $8.85 million to buy it and $7 to $10 million to rewild it. I actually have the documents that says that's the bid to rewild it. So for $20 million, I'm sorry, I think the County of Marin can spend their money more wisely. So thank you if you want to sign the petition.
And I have some too, if Mrs. Clipboard is too busy.
All right, I think we're getting toward the end of our time. Any last minute? Okay.
Just real quickly, you mentioned two people running for MMWD, Jack Gibson and one other person.
Regnell.
From San Rafael, right?
Yes. Well, one's San Selmo, one's Santa Fe.
San Rafael. So I know Jack, but I don't know the other person. Can you tell me a little bit about Greg Nell?
Yeah, Greg Nell has been on the Santa Fe School Board, I think, 16 years. He has quite a list of accomplishments both on the school board and other political activities. He's also been very tied into the Democratic Party here in Marin. In fact, his mother was a stalwart pioneer, and so he's been doing this for decades. As is his brother, who's a colleague of Maria's on the Nevada School Board.
Are they both on the printing industry?
Yes.
Both on the printing industry.
Yeah.
All right, with that, thank you to our guests. Terrific presentation. So you all know how to vote now, right?